Thank you very much, Remco, and to everyone at CCA for helping to organise this. I am Stephen Bode, I'm Director of Film and Video Umbrella. We're one of the partners in the project. To begin, I think often when people gather together to talk about the future, it often marks or signals the beginning of something. This, somewhat perversely, is perhaps more of an ending event. More of a closer than an opener. By that I don't mean to bring any kind of advance news that the future has been cancelled until further notice, or bring bad tidings about there is no hope or anything like that. This is simply one of the final instalments of one small future-facing project, which is, as you will see behind me, an exhibition and an initiative called Tomorrow Never Knows, which Film and Video Umbrella has been working on in collaboration with Jerwood Visual Arts and CCA. That project, I should just talk a little bit more about it. It is a 2-year initiative, the product and the outcome of something called the Jerwood Film and Video Umbrella Awards, which is a scheme for developing and commissioning work by younger or emerging artists who are who are 5 years or less out of college and starting their professional practice. It is something we launched 2 years ago now, and this is the culmination of it, the final exhibition of the 2 commissioned works by Atkins and Naheed Raza, which are on exhibition here at CCA. It is an initiative which is slightly different from other showcases of new young talent, as it were, in as much as it gives those artists both a development opportunity to really think about the work in moving image that they want to make and to prototype it and pilot it before 2 of those artists get chosen to make quite large-scale commissions works. Ed and Naheed's pieces are here, the 2 commissions, and also, interestingly, the pilot piece that Ed made before, which was shown at Jerwood Visual Arts, is also on exhibition here. A few little things just to mention about that project. We thought it was interesting thinking in terms of artists who might come to be the rising stars of the future, who obviously had a bright future in front of them. That one of the things that we wanted to do with the project was to give it a theme and a subject and a framework to make the works around. And we thought it would be interesting to, given the fact that these were artists who very much felt like they could be the names or the faces of the future in some way, to get them to consider or to contemplate what the future might mean to them in, as we all know, precarious and uncertain times, and what our contemporary definitions of the future might mean in relation to other perceptions of it in the past. There's been a lot of talk of, and perhaps a nostalgia for, past futures, moments which have gone, which used to embody potential or possibility, or lost futures that never happened. And part of that slightly nostalgic turn, I think, is something we'll talk about. But we wanted the artists to really consider some of these ideas in the framework for their pieces. And I think, as you'll see, and you will have opportunity to do this at lunchtime, Naheed and Ed have come up with 2 works which are both very forward-looking and interesting in their own right, in how they use material and how they make work, which really resonates with today, but also engage with that theme about moments in the past which may have carried some weight or potential, which we're now looking back on in an interesting way. Before we look back, I should look forward and talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. A few other things to mention: if anyone's going to tweet or talk about the project, the hashtags we're going to use are TNK13 and the future. There's a great big banner for the project there, but there's also stuff about the schedule for the day and the short-term future on your handouts. Some of these timings are approximate, and I will do a very brief introduction to what I hope will be some of the themes of the day, and then I'll introduce our 2 main speakers this morning. But a few remarks from me. I'm probably going to read this rather than improvise it. But anyway, I thought it would be good to, at the very beginning, to focus on the title, Tomorrow Never Knows. As many of you will have noticed, of course, it's an allusion to an iconic piece of music which in its day would have seemed to many people like it was being beamed in from the future. The sound of tomorrow, a little glimpse of the unknown. In recent years, a number of music writers, and two of the finest of them are sitting in the room with us today, have lamented the absence of even a frisson of that shock of the new, and the way its disconcerting alien signal has become replaced or drowned out by an increasing preoccupation with the sounds of the past, at least their traces or their echoes, or part of a phenomenon that Simon Reynolds has dubbed retromania. This process may be part of a wider postmodern turn in our culture in general, but it's clearly been accelerated. Sorry, I've lost my place. Clearly been accelerated by advances in digital technology and the spread of the internet, all of which have made it more and more possible for those revenants of the past to live on, messing hugely with our sense of time in the process. Sometimes this reflexive return will take the comforting, consoling form of nostalgia. Sometimes it feels more like seeking or channeling the aura of a lost kind of authenticity. At other times, the ever-present, ever-increasing availability of past material provokes new remixes, collages, mashups. Maybe that famous mantra had it wrong. It's not a question that those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. It's maybe that our digitally enhanced, instantly downloadable memory palace of past glories demands that we inhabit it and relive it. As some commentators have joked, we are maybe at the point of peak memory now, in the way that we were not so long ago at the point of peak oil, and we are burning it with no thought of tomorrow, just deferring and deferring and deferring. As other people have noticed, this maxing out of the supersaturated present may not be simply what delays or forestalls the future. It may be that it may be what the future itself is starting to look like, maybe pretty much is. If that sounds slightly portentous, here's a thought that came out of a conversation I had the other week with Sarah Lowndes, who's speaking today, later this afternoon. And we were reminding ourselves how, in an era before mobile phones, people would arrange to meet each other and generally be pretty much on time, give or take a few minutes, because there was often no way of contacting each other when we were out. And now, with these things, we more often than not turn up late, because we can let the person at the other end know. So is this an everyday micro example of us eking out more and more of the insatiable present moment? If you aggregated all of those extra 15 minutes of apologetic but increasingly accepted lateness, what would they amount to? If we ourselves are forever turning up late in our rushed escape from the present, is it any wonder that the future is also taking its time showing its face? The genie is out of the bottle now, of course, and we can't turn the clock back, if only in the desire to make it go forward again. And anyway, we should console ourselves that it isn't always out of a feeling of nostalgia that we look back to the past. Sometimes there are particular moments in history that do seem pivotal or instructive and really resonate with now. When we started to sketch out the framework for this symposium, Francis McKee and I, Francis from CCA, got quite excited, maybe slightly overexcited about one of those moments, which we pinpointed around 20 years ago in 1993, in which a vogue for futurity in music, techno and rave, actually chronicled by Simon Reynolds in his book Energy Flash, coexisted with early cyberculture, with its spectres of cyborg bodies and the radical cyber philosophy of Nick Land and Sadie Plant. Maybe Francis and I thought this could be claimed as perhaps the last moment when futurity could be claimed as being infused with such a radical burst of utopian energy before the early internet flatlined and became more corporate, and Blur and Oasis, as the standard bearers of retro, brought it absolutely into the mainstream. Olia Lialina, one of the pioneering net artists from the early 90s, will remind us of some of the spirit of that era, which has rapidly become another example of a kind of lost future. Lost in tangible ways as well, in that many of the products of the early days of the World Wide Web appear to have vanished, either impossible to locate or impossible to reformat. There's a strange paradox here in that the digital technology which has facilitated the revival, retrieval, or rehabilitation of the cultural artifacts and icons of so many other fields and genres, seems to have been really rubbish at looking after its own. Maybe we thought that if it was digital, it would always be around somehow, as we still seem to think, maybe with the whole Prism thing that's going on at the moment. Olia's presentation this afternoon will remind us that that isn't always the case. Indeed, that it's sometimes easier to conjure up the spirit of that time than some of the actual artworks from it. In recent weeks, I've been haunted by a phrase in Evgeny Morozov's new book, which is called To Save Everything, Click Here, in which he talks about us moving from a future that's trailblazed by a spirit of optimism to one that's characterized by an increasing impulse towards optimization. Optimism, optimization. We don't want to make the world a better place, we simply want to make the world a better place. In that infinitesimal semantic distinction, there's clearly a sort of huge tectonic cultural shift. In these terms, there seems very little inclination to rip it up and start again, to steal another phrase from Simon Reynolds this time by way of Scotland's Edmund Collins. Instead, the existing determining influences are largely taken as a given, but with a proviso that they can usually be improved and or ameliorated. An upgrade here, a smart fix there, a nod to the green agenda there. This is not the Vorsprung durch Technik of the white heat of post-war technological modernity, all played out to the soundtrack of Kraftwerk, not by any means. It's something quieter, less obviously declaratory, but equally insistent. Morozov fires a lot of barbs critiquing the geeky need to find and generate solutions. Solutions, or solutionism as he calls it, are in his terms part of the problem. If we return again to our project title, it's not that technology isn't offering us a better tomorrow. It's clearly part of its promise and its calling card. What it struggles with, perhaps, is the never knows part of the equation. It doesn't do uncertainty very well. It doesn't come naturally to the faith in technology solutionists that Morozov criticizes. We can perhaps see a realization of this in a typically clunky, smart but dumb response to it as well, in the move within artificial intelligence technology circles to engineer serendipity. Every time I hear the phrase, it makes me think of music, actually, and syncopation and what makes it move and tick, of how a software program can automate things perfectly, but absolutely struggle with things like feel. We know, if we know anything, that creativity is more often than not sparked, not only by the chance discovery, but also by the random mistake, by instances of human fallibility, the unknown, the glitch. Can you really instill or mobilize irrationality by rational means, as Morozov's technological solutionist would suggest? Can you really order or optimize the necessarily messy creative disorder, or the disorder of creativity? Is this a fundamental category mistake, not of the smart kind, but of the dumb kind? The artist and writer James Bridle is one of the country's most astute observers and critics of the contemporary technological impulse and the strange new brave new world we find ourselves in. Under the banner what he and others have termed the new aesthetic, he has staged a number of interventions and events and delivered images and insights that I, for one, have found absolutely fascinating and compelling. As always, I'm very much looking forward to what he has to say this afternoon, and I think that will be a really important part of the day as well, following Olia Lialina after lunch. After James, the lecturer, curator and writer Sarah Lowndes, based from Glasgow, will give her response to the day as well, and then hopefully open out a larger discussion in which members of the panel, or members of the people speaking today, will be part of a panel to discuss these things, and that panel will also include Ed Atkins, the artist who's here today. As I said earlier, you've got a chance to see the works in an extended lunch break, and as I said earlier, they're both two pieces which I think bring an awful lot to the theme of the day and to the subject of the exhibition as a whole. But before then, we have two fantastic writers and speakers this morning who both started out and mainly focus on music, but have a larger eye for cultural trends and shifts and phenomena. I'm talking of Simon Reynolds and Paul Morley. The idea this morning is that Simon will speak first and deliver a presentation of about an hour, and then Paul will then do a response to that, but also engage in a conversation and a dialogue with Simon, which we hope will then radiate out to include you in the audience. There should be enough time, certainly a fair amount of time, to do that before we break for lunch. It's my very great pleasure to introduce two writers who I have an enormous amount of time and respect for, and let's begin the day properly by welcoming Simon Reynolds to the stage. He's just arrived from Los Angeles, a little bit jet lagged, but looking very chipper and dapper at the same time. So welcome Simon Reynolds to begin the day.